Seeing images of glory in my mind at enlistment. Overhead a flapping red, white, and blue, filling the distance. A grand divide between myself and conscientious convictions or belief systems that stop people from killing over religion. I was young, and I was out of options in my mind. It was supposed to be fun, my obligations ill-defined. I'd either want to take charge with a gun back in my mind. Without college or riches, no dreams are realized. Well, I never have the ladder the Marines to get me the first. Ain't nothing better than dress blues and the one spitting this verse. You see the world get to the GI Bill, fat in the purse. My recruiter made it sound simple, a play get well rehearsed. Forever cursed to the ones who get young innocent signatures under the guise of from God and country their honor diminishes. Greed built a standing army when against the founders' wishes. Now free democracy conducts war games and peacekeeping missions. Ironic hypocrisy.
Falling tears, raindrops from your eyes. Falling rain, let it fall.
I scored high on my entrance exams on ASVAB and chose the 0341 with guaranteed Hawaii track. Graduated basic, now MOS school's where I'm at. I'm more than a man with a 35-pound gun on my back. Plus my rifle 8 pounds, 65-pound pack. I'm 18, weigh a $195 and feel jack. 108 pounds on my back, a boot marine and Cadillacs. A short 20-mile hump, 4 quarts in my flat. After 7 miles, swearing in my right foot crack. I'm an E1, tell my sergeant I think it snapped. He's an E5, shouts profit, don't feed me crap. You got 2 feet, compensate and don't fall back. After 4 more miles, my left foot joins in the act. Only 9 more to go, I walked through all, that's a fact. 1 certificate for intestinal fortitude, not having shat. And 3 months healing, lost Hawaii to Guantanamo, rap.
Sergeant Davey Twelve, who I met in 6th grade. Dress greens, patent leather, and a high top fade. My mind was made up, I couldn't wait to grow up so I could sign up, man up, and stop the corrupt. A champion for God and country. Just wait till they get a load of me, an unstoppable PFC. Private first class, polished brass. I wanted to kill all the black pajamas that were hiding in the grass. But with no war in sight, my plight to fight never took flight. So I trained during the day and got drunk at night. Set my sights on all types of glory. Fast forward to Afghanistan, totally different story. IEDs, enemies, no front line to see. 80 pounds of gear in the desert, I could hardly breathe. Blood-stained fatigues, very many colleagues sent home to the VA to live with PTSD. Everyday recruiters go to inner cities and ask for
falling tears, raindrops from your eyes. Falling rain, let it fall.
I never let my children volunteer for the military to make the same mistakes as I did these days could be deadly. If they're drafted with Dodgers, my go back, stay ready. I support Manning and Snowden. You know where this country's heading. Global tyrant, hegemonic, bully police force, demonic practice. Virgin sacrifice, bloodlust. All your wars valuing corporations over people. This is sick worship by objects and pure evil. Material desires get more attention than spiritual. Benefits are based on profits, complaints aren't given view. Arms manufacture, supply both sides of conflicts. Do you have a problem with any of these statements or doubt their truth? I'm a father and a veteran, and I stand for peace. Julian Assange against our commanders-in-chief. But it's hard to be better when daily demands compete. I'm not ignoring the slaughter, I'm just trying to eat like you.
Falling tears, raindrops from your eyes. Falling rain, let it fall.
Oh, I realized I was on mute. Good afternoon, y'all. We are excited to see you in the space with us again for another weekly episode, or really discussion. I won't even say episode. We come in this space to have conversation. We hope that from it, that you will, converse with us in the chat, engage in your community. One of the things that we always, I guess, sort of harp on in this space is that we want these conversations to be organizing opportunities, for you to either go and watch something, read something, engage with people who you might not already be in community with, and feel like that is truly how we achieve world peace, both here at home and also abroad. My name is Natasha. I'm an Air Force veteran. Left my hometown of Chicago right after high school on a 4-year plan to enlist in the Air Force. Somehow those 4 years turned into 20. After retiring, a lot of what I had participated in and experienced came up for me. Quite honestly, for the majority of my career, I was, drunk with patriotism, enjoying the accolades of being a sharp airman, right? I did everything that the Air Force had asked me to. I'd exceed every standard that was put in front of me. And then there were some things towards the end of my career that really shocked me to consciousness. It radicalized me politically. And once I retired, it all sort of came up. And I met some of the right people at the right time that really helped the process to unpack what it looks like. And that's how I sort of matriculated to Veterans for Peace. I'm currently the vice president of the National Board of Directors, and deeply involved in my community and organizing around things such as more robust education and trades versus JROTC. And also, I'm currently really working with the community to talk about, like, what do we need right now? And one of the things that's critically important being in Chicago is to not have police in our schools. So that's really like my basic introduction, Mike. Always good to see you, brother, my co-host. Come on, introduce yourself.
Yeah, hello. Hi, Natasha. Good to be here again. Yeah, we have a lot to talk about today. And hello, everyone out there on the internet. Glad you're here. Please like, subscribe, and share our content. Please comment and contribute. So my name is Mike James. I joined the Navy in 2008. February of 2008 is when I shipped off to boot camp. And up till then, I think I was 26 years old when I shipped off to boot camp. At that time, I was a photographer and an artist. I had a degree in photography. And for me, it was about kind of trying something new, doing something physically demanding while I still had my youth. And I thought I'd give it a shot. And at that time I was really into martial arts, and I kind of understood theory of martial tradition, and I thought the military would be pretty easy. And the reality is that it kind of was for me in a way, boot camp. I knew what to say, what to expect. I knew that when you go and the military asks you questions about yourself or your history, you tell them what they want to hear. You don't play games. And you tell them what they want to hear, you do what they tell you to do, and you live a relatively simple life. And I was good at that, and I succeeded at it, and I got a contract to be a photographer in the Navy. And I had a strange Navy career where I never spent more than a day on a ship. I ended up being in a reconnaissance squadron first off, and our first deployment was to Iraq in 2009. Right after the Obama surge. So Obama sent an additional, I think, something like 60,000 troops to Iraq at that time, maybe split between Iraq and Afghanistan, about 60,000 troops. And we were there to essentially corroborate. What's the word? Corroborate. Anyways, we were there to assist Army units in documenting insurgency in southern Iraq. And we lived near the ancient city of Ur, near some enormous burn pits on an airfield, and we experienced daily burn pits, rocket attacks. It was a really horrendous set of conditions, and I photographed it every day while I was there. I took lots of pictures, and I have an incredible archive, gigantic body of work that I can go back and I can look on and I can meditate on. 6 months after I came home from Iraq, I deployed to Afghanistan with NATO, which is, in the news. NATO and Biden, they're talking about withdrawing troops from Afghanistan. So I was there in Kabul, in the very heart of it. I worked for several NATO generals while I was there, and I saw firsthand kind of the mindset, the strategy, the tactics. I was actually deployed in Afghanistan when Osama bin Laden was killed, and I was working at that time. My senior enlisted person that I was working for was a Navy SEAL Master Chief. And we were working in the cadre of a 2-star Canadian general, NATO general, and we worked with several NATO forces. So I experienced that all firsthand. So I have a lot of opinion and firsthand experience about what's going on there, why they do the things they do, and how they do it. But after getting out of the military, well, I should also add that before I got out of the military, I worked at the Pentagon, essentially the Defense Media Activity, which is the military's central hub for all propaganda, public affairs. So I also saw that mindset and that the strategy and tactics behind military propaganda, and saw that all firsthand. I lived just off base at Fort Meade during the Chelsea Manning trials, which was interesting because I saw the protests right outside the front gate of Fort Meade and the National Security Agency, NSA. And that really made me think quite a bit, because I had, everyday Americans right there in my front yard, essentially, because I lived in military housing right outside the front gate. And I would see everyday Americans out there protesting to support Chelsea Manning and, the free press, essentially supporting free press and the freedom of speech. And there I was, a thug, a military stormtrooper, an imperial stormtrooper, as it were, having to wrestle with those ideas. And I wanted to be out there supporting them, but there I was. I had to go to work in uniform every day with my boots shined and looking extra sharp, and go in there knowing that what I was doing was propaganda. But so that made me think quite a bit about what I was doing. And when it came time for me to get out of the military in 2014, after 6 years, I had to make a hard decision. Should I stay in and continue to receive a comfortable salary, being a very well decorated and I had quite a bit of success. I had collected all the shiny ribbons because I'd been through 2 wars, and I had good conduct, and I did what I was told. Should I stay in and continue to receive a good salary, or should I go home and live with my mom? That was essentially it. And I made the hard choice, and I literally got out of the Navy and I went home, and I think I lived with my mom for about 2 or 3 weeks after I got out, and had to do a lot of soul searching. And it took me several years, but I came a whole new conclusion and worldview. So, so that's essentially it. That's my experience with the military. And now that I've achieved this new worldview, it's fun to come on here and talk about where I am today, how I see the world, and I've achieved a whole new level of understanding. So it's fun to be on here interacting with all of you. I see Patrick is once again in the comment section. Good to see Patrick.
He was holding you, tugging on your conscience, because he was outside the gate protesting then. I believe at the time he was probably teaching in the Maryland School District. So.
Oh, right on. That's wild. I didn't know that.
Yeah. So one thing that I didn't realize, Mike, is that we were deployed at the same time. So
right.
November, actually the day after Thanksgiving 2009, I got on a plane for a joint assignment during that Obama surge. And I returned home with a lot of different understandings. I didn't communicate them, but I certainly started to feel conflictions around a lot of things. I sat in those big rooms, those 3-star rooms, and you're getting these commander update briefs on what's happening in real time, and you start questioning what's it all for while in that uniform. Man, that is a huge, you don't know what to do with that. So I didn't realize that we were actually in the sand at the same time. And you were in Iraq, and I was right next door at a joint assignment in Kuwait at Arab Jar.
Yeah, we went through Kuwait many times.
Yeah.
So
So
yeah, I see Lynn Mack in the comments. I just want to extend solidarity to you and the Palestinian people.
absolutely.
I agree with everything you say there. Yankees go home. And death to America, by the way. I agree with you.
Absolutely. Thank you for being here, Lynn. And one thing that I think is, I know you have some current events. So
Yeah.
like what's going on militarily, in terms of in the world of under this new administration. I'm curious to hear your deep dive on what's going on.
Yeah. So we got a new president now. We got this guy Biden, who, for all intents and purposes, and when you sit down and examine his history, isn't a whole lot different than former President Trump. As a matter of fact, it's probably pretty easy to argue that Biden has a much deeper and longer history of imperialist conquest and genocidal tactics established in all kinds of countries across the world. But that being said, he and his administration and the Pentagon have announced that they will be withdrawing all troops from Afghanistan in May, no later than September 11th, I believe, in different articles that I've read. So right now there's about 2,500 American troops in Afghanistan, which are, kind of a minority in terms of the full occupying force in Afghanistan. There's more than 9,000 NATO troops there. I know when I was in Afghanistan, there were more than 34 coalition countries, which means that there were more countries than, it wasn't just NATO. It was small countries that you wouldn't expect, like Mongolia. When I went to bed at night in Afghanistan, Mongolian troops guarded the door to my barracks. So that's a strange state of affairs. So if the United States withdraws their 2,500 troops from Afghanistan, there's nothing to be said in any of these articles, whether it's BBC or any of the mainstream corporate news, CBS, Wall Street Journal, New York Times. They say that the American troops are being withdrawn, but they don't say anything about the remaining NATO troops, coalition countries, and let's not forget thousands and thousands of contractors from around the world. So I think what's likely to happen is that, first, I don't believe him. There will likely be troops that remain there after May. But if we take him at his word, which I advise people don't do, if we take him at his word and they withdraw troops, the country's been at war for 20 years. Longer than that, really. The war in Afghanistan kind of began in the late 70s, in 1979, 78, when the U.S. began kind of covert operations undermining the Soviet Union's efforts to establish peace and build modern infrastructure in the north, in Kabul. That's all really well documented. And so we have a country that's been at war for 40 years, more than 40 years. The imperialist nations have been pushing their agenda on them and purposefully creating civil war, creating division, creating strife among the classes, among the different racial groups. And now the United States says it's going to withdraw 2,500 troops. And what does that mean? What can we expect to happen in that post-American invasion world of I think it's a pretty dark. It's dark. I entirely support the withdrawal of all troops. All NATO should be withdrawn, and we should restore power to the working class people of Afghanistan. We have to do everything we can for them to be able to prop up their own government and to resist civil war and strife within their country, and to be able to build infrastructure. So the American empire, I don't think, is really capable of doing that. I don't think they're interested in that. I think that the American settler colonial project that started 500 years ago with the genocide of Native Americans and the 300 plus years of slavery in America is something that's absolutely baked into how we conduct business. And I don't expect that to ever change with any of our relationships or affairs with other countries, especially countries where we have occupying troops. So that's kind of my report and my thoughts on what's going on with Afghanistan. There's some other interesting news going on, which I think in a way kind of relates to what's going on with race in the military. And okay, where do I go with this? Okay, so there's another big event that happened where the United States, on the very same day that the Secretary of Defense, Lloyd, what's his full name? Who's the SecDef Lloyd. Why can't I find it? The Secretary of Defense. Who is the Secretary of Defense? Lloyd Austin. Okay, so Lloyd Austin, who happens to be a black man who graduated from West Point and has served for 41 years, he visited Israel recently in the interest of restoring negotiation and talks in Iran concerning the nuclear deal, or the JCPOA. And on that very same day, Israel committed a cyber attack on Iran nuclear plants. Basically, any sovereign country has the right to develop nuclear technology for power, for energy, and for medical purposes. But Israel fundamentally disagrees because they have a genocidal project that they're trying to carry out against the Middle East, against Iranians, against Palestinians, anyone who stands against their imperialist project. And so basically, kind of what was happening is that Biden, his administration, and the Secretary of Defense, Lloyd Austin, were there to try and reinstall or renegotiate the nuclear deal, and by proxy try to establish some sense of normalcy in the region and create a sense of peace. And Israel thumbed their nose at that, and they say we'll do whatever we want. We don't care about American interests. We don't care. We certainly don't care about the interests of the Iranian people. We're going to go ahead and carry out this cyber attack against their refining facilities, and it's an act of terror. Essentially, is what it is. It's imperialist terrorism, and it should be universally condemned by all Americans and all working class, all thinking people across the world. But you see, it's funny because you go in and you look at what's going on in the media and how they talk about it. I could Google it right now. So Israel attack on Iran, and we see, the first thing that comes up I see here is Iran vows revenge for Israeli attack on nuclear site. Well, that's an interesting way of stating it. All of a sudden, you have Iran being the aggressor. They're vowing revenge all of a sudden. The other Iran and Israel shadow war takes a dangerous turn. Okay, that Iran and Israel are conducting a shadow war. Well, I mean, Iran is just a sovereign country trying to exist to keep its people from starvation and have friendly and open relationships and trade negotiations with the rest of the planet. Meanwhile, everything they do, they continue to get terroristic attacks on them. We had the illegal bombing on the general recently. I'm sorry, I can't remember his name. And then we've had thousands and thousands of illegal drone attacks carried out on the people of Syria by Israel. So, I mean, over and over again, Israel has proven itself to be the aggressor and the one willing to commit violence. But in media, we continually see Iran being depicted as the person, as the nation, as the aggressor. So that's fundamentally screwed up, and we need to rethink the way we view that conflict fundamentally. And, you know, I was trying to get to the point, I was kind of thinking in terms of like, you know, what does that mean that our Secretary of Defense, the same day that he shows up in Israel, what does that mean? Well, you know, I don't think it's a coincidence that we have all of these incidences across the world where Black people in the military are, you know, we had a F-22 pilot recently resign because of discrimination within the military. We had a Army lieutenant recently harassed and attacked in his vehicle by policemen who turned out that the policeman ended up getting fired and never came back to the job because of the incident. And now we have the Black Secretary of Defense show up to talk to the Israelis, and they blatantly disregard his presence and his authority and go and attack by attacking Iran. So, you know, it's not a coincidence that the same settler colonial state, again, that massacred millions of Native Americans, thousands, tens, hundreds of thousands of Africans, and enslaved them, is now, you know, it's not a coincidence that Black people don't get respect in the U.S. military. It's all part of the same white supremacist project that started 500 years ago. So there we are. I went on a tear there. We're already at 5:30.
It's all good. I mean, we talked about this, like, take up as much space. I think these are important things to talk about. Folks are engaging in the chat. I saw you engaging with folks, you know, questions in the chat. So this is the right topic at the right time, particularly as our country is in unrest right now for really what the segue was. I think, you know, we talked about this a lot, like why we started Stand Down, the name, the behind, you know, the reason why was really a letter, a strongly worded letter that we wanted to send to the National Guard after the murder of George Floyd. And around that time, Ahmaud Arbery, Breonna Taylor, and so many names who, you know, have not just captured like national news, but we still say their name. And is, you know, quite honestly, because we saw the contradiction of being military veterans and seeing the training or the operations that we witnessed on deployments that, you know, somehow we rationalize as okay abroad, but to see those same tactics show up on the streets in our cities via the National Guard. And so, Mike, I think you talked about this, is really how Black folks in America, and also how I view things, is there's a war that's happening in our community via the militarized, trained police departments who look no different than any special ops unit, who are riding the same MRAPs or military vehicles via the Defense Logistics Agency's 1033 program, whereby these cities benefit from the excess equipment that the military wastes our funding on. Shout out to the folks that's doing the work on People Over Pentagon, because we quite honestly talk about not just, you know, why we started this, but that we see the parallels and the contradictions in terms of when we talk about peace abroad and wanting to reconcile what we see the military doing in foreign spaces, that we also need to turn our attention to, you know, police. And so until all of us are safe, none of us are safe. So we wanted to, I think it's good for us to always talk about these, you know, these real-time issues. This past, like, what, 2 weeks, we now have 2 videos that we want to show. They're not long in length, but really just to set some context and some, community education around what we're talking about in terms of, where we are in America. So it's not just in our ranks, but we're going to sort of, segue from what we see happening in the military, that while we were also on active duty, either you suffered through it or you benefited from it. There are very few in betweens there. So I think that these two videos that Mike and I want to share with y'all, and then hopefully we can drop your questions in the chat. Let's talk about it. We'll get into it, and that's how we'll close out the show, really talking about what peace at homes look like in this moment as the people are in the streets demanding justice. So give me a moment. I will share my screen and we'll get into it.
You're clearly someone who takes care of yourself, so why wait to screen for colon cancer?
There's an ad,
because when
y'all.
caught in early stages, it's more treatable.
Oh man, advertisements. Capitalist realism. We can't do anything without first getting a little brainwashing, Everything we do. Oh, okay. Protect your colon. Cool. All right.
Correspondent David Martin on race in the ranks.
Every single African American we've interviewed said they had to moderate their behavior so they weren't intimidated.
I had a very candid conversation with one of the individuals who passed me this information. He broke it down. You're big, you're black, with a deep voice. You're intimidating. And if you want to move on, you have to do something about it.
This week on 60 Minutes, we reported on racial bias in the military. From the rank and file to officers, African Americans in the Air Force say they are treated differently than their white counterparts. Major Daniel Walker is an F-22 pilot. On an Air Force program called Real Talk, hosted by Lieutenant General Brad Webb, he read comments made by other black pilots.
I have a couple of quotes I want to read off.
You bet.
My fighter experience was the most demoralizing experience in my life, and I've been homeless. The second is, to be yourself and thrive in a fighter squadron as a black man is an oxymoron. Either conform or fail. These are my friends. These are my brothers and my sisters, actually.
Walker sat down with us to share his story.
This story is not uncommon. I could very easily attribute this interaction to that action on my part. But when you compare stories from people you've never met, and they're almost identical, down to the individual and down to the comment, you start to realize these are not singular events in one person's life.
Walker grew up in Dallas. His family told stories of his great uncle, Norman Scales, a Tuskegee airman who earned a Distinguished Flying Cross for combat missions during World War II.
At 6 years old, to have your dad's uncle be a Tuskegee airman and see the movies and hear about Uncle Scales, he's got a street named after him in Austin. Your family can't help but talk about him. And when I was born and they saw things in me, I felt at a very early age those hopes start to transition to my shoulders. He flew fighters and he changed the trajectory of my family's history. So that's what I'm going to do.
Determined to follow in those footsteps, Walker went to the Air Force Academy and from there to pilot training. Had you been told what to expect at flight school?
Unfortunately, yes. We've had alumni come back, black pilots who'd gone through pilot training. The story was, you're going to go. They're going to treat you poorly. When you wash out, they're probably not going to keep you in the Air Force. So if you go, don't go trying to fly fighters. But in the grand scheme of things, probably don't go.
How did that play in your decision about whether to go?
Well, in my mind, I have to prove it can be done and then prove it can be repeatable.
Walker excelled at flight school and earned a coveted assignment to fly the Air Force's top-of-the-line F-22 stealth fighter. So you go to F-22 school?
Yes, sir.
What was that like?
It was a blast. It was the most fun I'd ever had in my entire life. Seeing things and doing things with so much power underneath you and behind you and around you that it's surreal.
Did you feel your race going through the F-22 training?
Not initially. I got feedback at the end of this course, however, that it was very evident that I was having a good time and maybe I shouldn't have been, or I talked too much. I started to realize that maybe there was something more to this. Things like, if you don't assimilate, we will weed you out. Or I have to ask myself, is this a me thing or is this something else? And that takes a lot of energy to carry that question mark around with you.
After his training, Walker joined an F-22 squadron in Langley, Virginia. Did you feel like you belonged?
I did initially. I did.
Initially.
You start to hear feedback like, he's too quiet. It seems like he thinks he's too good to be here or too good for this place. And they try to be a different form of quiet, or the way he walks is intimidating.
After 11 years as an Air Force officer, Walker decided it was time to move on.
I had to really start taking seriously my happiness, my well-being, ask myself, am I willing to continue fighting uphill and chance going back to a squadron where I have to manage myself this way and sacrifice these things personally? Will I get anywhere?
Walker's departure leaves the Air Force with fewer than 50 black fighter pilots. Lieutenant General Brad Webb.
It's a loss for the Air Force. He was an incredible pilot, an incredible officer, outstanding officer for us, but he served our nation well.
Walker has been accepted at Harvard Law School.
That flag still means a ton to me. I have something unique to add to my country in a different plane. My decision to go to law school, which is what I have planned next for myself, centers around that. How can I take everything I've experienced here to include these interviews in this moment in time and channel it, this energy, toward affecting change? If I'm going to do anything with the rest of my life, I think it's going to be that. It has to be that.
You're clearly someone who takes care of yourself.
Oh, goodness. My bad. So I think the real thing about that is you hear him talk about he's going to take this experience and this moment in time and channel it into being an outstanding lawyer, we hope, one day. And I'll tell you from experience, the Air Force will definitely, it'll do a couple things with you. It'll chip you off and break you, or you use that experience and you try to channel it one step at a time to be a vessel for really to just lift it up. But also you bring it with you in your experience and your understanding of things. It's shameful that we recruit aggressively Black, poor, Latinx, indigenous folks into the military, and then when they're in the ranks and they exceed the standard, that they experience this. I think it's a national embarrassment, but one that is definitely not new. We've seen this through Winter Soldier. If you've seen it, the Vietnam stories that were being told there. And, going forward, we've really ignored the extremism that we see in our ranks that has been reported way back into, countless eras, but for sure in the media as recent as the 80s and 90s. And so when you think about what does extremism in the military look like, well, someone's getting the short end of that stick. And so I think that that's where you see the major here illustrating that, and something that I'm going to talk about until the day I finally close my eyes, because I think it's important for people to know the contradictions in the military that for me as a Black woman was always, centered around not just my experiences that brought me moral injury, but as a Black woman who gave the same oath, how my experience was categorically different from my peers. So now we have the second story. Mike, you want to give some thoughts there?
Yeah, don't join the military. Anybody, don't join it, especially if you're a person of color, because it's not going to work out for you. It's a shame because we had similar experiences and similar attitudes about joining the military. That it was generally it was a force of good, and that it just took the right people to get in there and try and make a change. You're not going to go in and change, 600 years of history, 500 years of history. Yeah. Okay. So what was the next article that you wanted to discuss?
Yeah, so we're gonna segue into this next video, which I think we'll use to really transition on what you and I chatted about early this weekend through text, is really around what's happening in our streets, which again, this is why we started this platform, that we wanted to be able to talk about it in a way to, we're talking to veterans, we're talking to non-veterans who are curious about just our, the perspective. So, taking up that space. So let's show this next video and then we'll get into some conversation. Mike, give me a moment to share my screen.
One of the police officers involved in a controversial traffic stop of a Black and Latino Army officer in December has been fired. Body camera footage shows Windsor, Virginia police officers Joe Gutierrez and Daniel Crocker pointing their guns at Army Second Lieutenant Karan Nazario before Gutierrez pepper sprays him. Lieutenant Nazario was released without being charged, and he is now suing both officers. CBS News correspondent Christina Raffini has the story.
What's going on?
How many occupants are in your vehicle?
It's only myself. Why are your weapons drawn? What's going on?
The door is slowly. Step out.
Get out! Get out the car! Get out! Now, I have not committed any crime.
In body camera and cell phone video, Army Second Lieutenant Karan Nazario, still in his uniform, holds his hands out the window of his new car, while two Windsor, Virginia police officers, guns drawn, order him to get out.
I'm honestly afraid to get out. Get out. Yeah, you should be. Get out of the car now. Get out of the car. Get your hands off me, please. Get your hands off me. You know what? Get your hands off me. Get your hands off me. I didn't do anything. Don't do that.
Nazario repeatedly asks why he's been pulled over before ex-officer Joe Gutierrez pepper sprays him through the open window.
Sir, just get out the car. I'm trying to breathe. Ugh. My dog is in the back. My dog is choking right now. Get out of the car.
Nazario is then kicked, forced to the ground, and put in handcuffs.
Why am I being treated like this? Why? I'm not cooperating.
The incident report says Nazario was pulled over for not having tags displayed on his SUV, but the temporary dealer plate is visible in the officer's body cam video. The report also said officers treated it as a high-risk stop because Nazario had tinted windows and drove at a very low speed to a gas station before pulling over, a move Gutierrez later said he understood.
As far as not stopping and considering comfortable and you want to roll this spot, Lieutenant, that happens all the time.
He did everything that we are told to do for everyone's safety.
Attorney Jonathan Arthur represents Nazario.
When you look in your rearview mirror and you see two firearms trained at you, you got to get real calm, real quick if you want to get out of there alive. You know, it's a credit to his training.
What are you, a specialist? What are you? I'm a lieutenant.
According to the lawsuit, the officers also threatened to derail Nazario's military career if he pursued further action against them.
If you want to just chill, let this go, and no charges filed, we'll take the handcuffs off, we'll get your bottle of water to drink on, and sit here until you feel comfortable driving.
Now, after that search of his vehicle turned up no violations, Nazario was released without charge. The governor of Virginia has asked state police to investigate the incident. CBS News reached out to the Windsor Police Department. We did not hear back. Anthony Nazario's attorney said he wanted to file the lawsuit to hold these two officers accountable. And so these kinds of stops stop happening.
Christina.
I mean, there it is. We talk about this. And my heart is with the lieutenant, and he's probably still unpacking that. I think this happened in December, but when you let me just be clear, I'm going to cut to it. Far more veterans, Black veterans, say that they felt more safe while assigned overseas. Be that in a myriad of places, or how many 800 bases that are OCONUS. That they felt more safe and welcomed than they did while wearing a U.S. uniform than they did on home soil. And so the reality there is that, the Lieutenant Nazario or Navarez, unfortunately, was smart enough to video that and capture it and push it forward. And so I am actually happy that came out. I think people need to see that reality, and we need to, again, start having real conversations about not just talking about what peace should look like globally, but what it should look like here at home, and realize that we have, in real time, we're watching things boil to a fever pitch, and we should be a lot more clear that we have a problem with our nation's policing, and we see over and over and over again that the most dangerous place for Black men is perhaps behind the wheel of a vehicle, because any excuse or any reason can be highlighted to pull that person over. And as you see, not just here, but we'll talk about Minnesota in a minute, but that this is like, it's becoming too much, quite honestly. So I'm gonna pause and just take a minute. Mike, you want to share some thoughts?
Yeah, it's those videos are always tough to watch, and it's a damn shame. Nobody deserves that kind of disrespect. When I watch something like that, what I see is the glaring reality that the United States is it's a police state that spends a lot of time and energy. Almost half the country's GDP on military spending. I share the opinion of George Jackson, infamous, famous hero of the working class and Black Panther, who wrote in the 70s that the United States is a fascist police state. And I think that's accurate. It has been for a long time. And it's just right now, the contradictions, that reality is being heightened. It's just becoming more and more obvious all the time. And I think there's also something there to be learned about the nature of the military versus the nature of the American police. I think that, the military, most people, the reality is, my own personal experience and from polling from across the board, a lot of people in the military join the military to escape poverty. The daughters and sons of senators and CEOs and the board of directors of major companies of Facebook and Amazon, all these people, they don't join the military. It would be foolish and stupid for them to join the military. If they told their friends, their Ivy League friends and their wealthy friends, that they felt an incredible need to join the military, they would get a sideways glance. The reality is that most people join the military to escape poverty, to get access to college, to travel, to get some kind of vocational training, and it's not another thing. It's not a coincidence, that Black and brown people who join the military often succeed. They do very, very well because they're grateful for the opportunity to get vocational training, and to be able to travel and get opportunity. And it's terribly ironic. If only we had, if we had the same opportunities for people who wanted to become scientists, for people who wanted to become doctors and lawyers and, people who contribute things to society, why don't they get the opportunity for paid vocational training with 30 days of paid leave the first day that you show up? Why don't they get free health care? There's a very specific reason why we offer all those things to people who want to join the military, and it becomes very obvious why a very bright, intelligent person like the man that we saw in that video would join the military, be very successful, become a lieutenant, an officer, and then face this type of violence here in the Imperial Corps. The same violence that we carry out around the world against, most countries in the world with our 800 military bases. The same violence that we inflict around the world comes home and is enacted on guys trying to drive their car down the road. So you know, that cop did get fired from his job, which is good. Grateful for that. But, you know, it highlights the fact that police can't really be, I think there's a difference. This is certainly a conversation worth having to debate. But there's something about, you know, the American military, most people come in, they do their 4 years, they get out. And most of them, the vast majority, are like, man, it's stupid. The military is dumb. We've all seen those videos on TikTok and Instagram and YouTube where the guy runs up in their face with a camera and says, hey, why'd you join the military? And they all look at the camera and they say, man, I don't know. Like, I did it for college. You know, I did it to learn a skill. You know, the vast majority of troops, I think, can be reformed. They go in, they get their 4 years, they get out, and they can be valuable to progressive movements. They have training, they have discipline, and we've got to reach out to those people. And I wish we could reach that lieutenant and help him to understand that the same violence that was inflicted on him, that, you know, he's a part of, and he's encouraging that type of violence to be inflicted in people in Syria and Palestine and many places on the globe right now. So we got to reach out. I think the value of being in organizations like Veterans for Peace or About Face is that we create that, you know, we stick a foot in the door. We jam the door open and say, look, you got to wake up. You got to get out of it. And we're all here for you. We've had this experience and we're happy to talk to you about it. We're happy to provide resources for you. We can help you, you know, understand how the world actually works. We can help you to work your way out of the military. You know, in many cases, people who become conscientious objectors can receive legal assistance and get out even on an honorable discharge and go on about their lives. And so when I see a video like that, that's just somebody that I want to reach out to and connect to and help them and help find their way out of the military. But
Yeah.
I'm really repeating myself.
No, you made great points, Mike. And that's, I thought that too when I hear, I mean, a fighter pilot, you know, you were close to flight lines and you understand the operations mindset. I think I've shared with you, like, the majority of my career was in the operations units, except for 3 of the 20 years. Right. And so you have this mindset, which is highly type A, which is highly competitive. And then when there's the process of elimination, you see the disparity. And again, you either experience it or you benefit from, the sacrificial lamb, which are usually folks who have a lot of melanin. So to be in those spaces is stifling. But I applaud the major for speaking out. Many people don't, even though we still hear the things that he sounds, a lot like he still holds on to what he participated in. I also hear him saying, but because of that, I'm going to use this experience to do something better and greater in the world, right? And many, many, many officers have these thoughts and keep them to themselves. So I thought it was awesome that at least it's brave for him to speak out. One thing that I was, when I look at the lieutenant and I just sort of, pop this in, my thought is just, here we have, George Floyd, was murdered, almost a year ago in Minneapolis, Minnesota. And, we saw the National Guard being deployed, active duty units being deployed to cities, predominantly non-white cities, poor, disenfranchised, disinvested communities who were standing in the streets and asking for, using their First Amendment right to protest their local government based on their policies. And what you saw was a military response. And so here we are again, amid the cop who put his knee on George Floyd's neck. We have another officer, Kim Potter, while training a police officer because she's a training officer herself with 26 years on the force, and also being the union president who has helped cops over the years evade accountability for their own actions. So she's quite aware, is what I'm getting at. Pulled her trigger and took the life of 20-year-old, Dante, who, is a father of a 1.5-year-old son. His parents, who have been married now for the past 23 years, talk about how he is the beat to their heart, and to be taken away. And you just sort of hear this family's pain, who's also driving a vehicle, who allegedly the tags were expired, amid a global health pandemic where that should not be the reality. But to hear them talk about their pain of losing their son really did create this parallel of what we are talking about around why we must have these difficult conversations around race. Even if we don't understand it, we need to be more inquisitive and ask more questions, particularly even in the veteran community. I sometimes see where we are demanding for atonement for military operations abroad, and rarely do I see the same level of conversation around atonement here at home. And so maybe you don't watch local news, and maybe you're not on social media, but if you are, how do you not see these two things as the same? And how are you not standing up in solidarity and accomplices in these streets to make sure that your neighbors have peace here at home? So, I have this thing where as veterans, I think we really need to have more difficult conversations, immerse ourselves in the peace movement here at home so that we can, heighten all these contradictions. Mike, what are your thoughts here on this?
Yeah, you're right. It's certainly, getting the veteran community activated, getting them mobilized is absolutely critical. I think it's important that we do hit the streets, that we do begin, we make it real clear that these police departments aren't going to get away with this. Every time this kind of thing happens, they have to hold the police accountable, because here's the thing is that whether or not it was an accident, whether or not, she killed the guy on purpose, Dante Wright, rest in power, whether she killed him on purpose or not, will the police department hold her accountable? Will there be any kind of repercussion? And I think we all know that the likely answer is that she'll face absolutely no kind of repercussion for this. So we have to make it very clear that we will be in the streets, that we will be raising hell, and they're not going to get away with it that easily. So, the empire is in decline, and everyone, our livelihoods, our economy is at stake all the time. Nobody's going to get away by assuming that through liberal ideology or through attaining wealth that that the world's going to be okay and that they're going to make it out just fine. Like, it's all coming down. So we all have to get activated, and we have to get busy, get organized, and have a lot of hard conversations about the nature of empire, the nature of militarism, and the military industrial complex, how it affects our daily lives, how it affects our economy. And I think it's really important to have a material basis, a material philosophy, and try and escape the ideology, the same ideology that allowed me to think that it was okay to join the military in 2008 as an ambitious young man trying to be a patriot. That was caused by ideology, a liberal ideology, and that's not okay. I was brainwashed. I have to get away from that, and I have to have a brand new materialist philosophy. So yeah, I'm really going off on one, and I'm getting away from the point here.
No, it's a good point. And had you not said that, I really want to say that I remember there are no bases here in Chicago. I know that back in the day there used to be, I think it was Chinook Air Base, where a lot of maintainers were trained, but that's no longer here. You know, an hour outside of the city is Great Lakes Naval Training Base. But I didn't, you know, grow up in a military town and think that this was the thing, the rite of passage or anything. And I don't come from a military strong background. But I was groomed through the JROTC program, you know, that I was sort of told would be a good thing for me. As a young Black girl on the south side of Chicago, we see JROTC, the proliferation in our schools dating back to the 90s. At the same time, we see career technical education being stripped from our schools, right? So, you know, that's really my, you know, thing that I talk about here locally is how we have to, you know, JROTC is not telling young people what they're going to feel like, whether they spend a year, 2 years, or 20, what they're going to feel like. And a lot of times we often don't say this aloud, but, you know, veterans are not, you know, and sometimes, you know, even resorting to taking their own lives. It is often because they're suffering from the contradictions of what they participated in. And we should say that out loud so that we, you know, start to have this conversation around just the need for care. Because a lot of veterans, you know, come back after their first deployment different. But we also know that there are folks who are going on their 13th deployment because the operations tempo is just that high, and it's not, you know, primed to change under the current administration either. So no matter what your pipeline is into the military, we talk about peer support. We think it's critically important for folks to feel like, you know, we have veterans who want to keep it real. So not that we're, you know, whatever you think Veteran for Peace is, but we quite honestly are folks who have participated in it, have been successful in it, and who could have very well, you know, stayed, you know, drunk on the Kool-Aid or, you know, on patriotism if we choose to. But I think that it's important to be a truth teller and to talk about why we think, despite what we've participated in, that we think that world peace. We think that the money that's wasted on interference abroad should be, particularly amid a global unprecedented health pandemic, that money needs to be spent on resources as we see our country fracturing around the need for mental health care, for traditional health care, that we see this, you know, new administration is asking for a more bloated Pentagon budget than even his predecessors. And I'm also wondering, like, where's the protest there? Let's not, you know, forget that, you know, a military budget is a military budget no matter who's passing it. And I think this current administration is asking for a lot more than even the prior, who was resisted quite a bit. So pay attention to local media, organizing your communities. And I think that is really how we achieve our mantra, our call to action, which is to have peace at home and peace abroad. Mike, any final closing thoughts?
No, you summed it up really well. This was a fun show, just cutting it up between the two of us. We covered a lot of ground, and I said a lot of things. Maybe some were correct and some were not quite as correct. So I appreciate everyone's feedback, and I appreciate everyone keeping me honest if I screw up. So yeah, this was a lot of fun, and we'll keep doing it.
Yep, we'll see you here next Wednesday, 5 p.m. Central, or excuse me, 5 p.m. Eastern for Central. Always here. Send us ideas. Drop some ideas for topics that you want us to talk about. If you have ideas for guests, let us know. We want to be open. If you have something to say, email us here at standdown@veteransforpeace.org. We'd love to have you on. Let's chop it up. But above all, let's stay active, because in order to achieve peace, it is a verb that we all must participate in. Stay away from COVID-19. We'll see you here next week. Peace, y'all.
All right. Peace. Power to the people.